everybody. I thought if I wore my PJs, it would be like you were in my own living room, like in a salon, you know? Because classical music, for some reason, has gotten a very bad rap as being some kind of a snooty thing. And people feel if they don't know a lot about it, sometimes they stay away from it. So it's my mission just to share. That's what it's all about. I mean, what's the use of being any kind of an artist if you don't share? So we're going to take a little musical trip from Bach to Brahms, with Beethoven in the middle, with the three B's and some other people. And the evolution of this was that I met Jerry and heard Jerry play, and she's a very busy gal. And how long has it taken? Is it 2 years? That we found the time. I guess I'm a busy fellow too, but very modest. But it's taken us this long to get together. So this program has rather evolved. A while ago, many moons ago, like pre-COVID, PC, I was invited to a Baha'i evening, and I met a Chinese lady who said she wanted to learn more about music. Well, that's going to the well. There I am. So we had this thing we used to do every month. But then COVID ended that. So when we got this program together, I thought I'd make a phone call to my Chinese connection. Trump has one, I have one also. And they said, I said, could you get me one gorgeous little kid maybe? Because it would be nice for the program. So my friend Joy Babcock, didn't get back to me right away. So that was a good idea, that another one that's gone the way of all flesh. But then she called me a few days just ago and said, I got 4 guys. Well, okay, the program's going to change now. So I thought, well, I guess I should hear them before I bestow them upon you. So they came to my house on Sunday, and are you in for a treat? There's nothing more beautiful than these kids playing this music that you usually only see, well, you don't see it at all. But when you do, you pay $200, you drive, you find the parking, you've had dinner, you're sitting there with gas, and you sit there and you watch a 50 or 60 or 70-year-old man play this music. And to see the joy and the ability of these people is really a special treat. So we've got 4 little special people here. But the thrust of the program is to take us through, we're going to do Bach. We're going to have a very firm foundation. You know, when you build a house, you have to do a very firm foundation. It's not the pretty part. Any of you who have done this, I know some of my friends have built houses, that foundation is very important. So we're going to have a lot of Bach, because Bach is the foundation, believe it or not, of modern European music. It's very difficult. I hate it when people ask me, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite musician? I don't have favorites.
Okay.
I love whatever I'm doing, no. But Bach, everyone you read about, Beethoven, Mozart, Brahms, Mendelssohn particularly, all of these people worship Bach. And when they decided they were going to teach theory in school, they went to Bach's music to take the rules out of his music. He is the perfect example of more than the sum of its parts. Because if you're an academic, you can take every single measure and explain exactly why he did what he did, like Pythagorean mathematics. But you don't hear that. You hear this magnificent music. There's not an extra note. I mean, he doesn't decide, you know what, I think we should play an octave. No. He works like a tapestry. The music goes like this in threads. You know, it's not like there's a melody and a harmony. It goes like this. So we're going to go start with some Bach, and then one of my Chinese people is going to play Bach, and then another Chinese person is going to play Bach, and another Chinese person is going to play Bach. So you're going to have a very firm foundation for this musical journey. And I want to say the 2 things, that there's a cellist and a violinist. There's probably nothing that Bach wrote that is not considered masterwork. I don't know if he destroyed anything, but everything can be sent through the most rigorous university professor and would pass muster. But the pieces we're going to hear tonight are very special. He wrote 6 suites for cello, and I think there's 6 for violin, unaccompanied. The genius of them is, on just that one instrument, he suggests such a depth of harmony. You would swear that you're hearing an orchestra. And every time, if you ever go to any debut recital in Carnegie Hall, you will see one of these pieces on it. Betcha. You have to study these things. It's considered the basis. So we're lucky we're going to get to that. But the first piece I'm going to play, and it's going to be interesting because I'm playing it with this thing, any price beauty, you know. But this is a little bit confining, and I didn't have a chance to find out how it's going to work out, but we'll see. What the heck. So the first piece I'm going to play is from a suite by Bach. It's a prelude. A suite is a set of dances. not necessarily that you get on your little toe shoes and dance, but the form is different dances. And this is the prelude to the third suite. This will get us started. I guess we'll do that. Oh, I put on my reading glasses. Any help is appreciated. Let me explain something about the music, the economy of it. His whole piece is based on. That's it. And the harmony that goes around it. The idea was to see how inventive you could be with an economy, a piece of material. Okay? So usually the suites start with a prelude and they end with a jig. So we're lucky that now we're going to have a jig. It's from a guy by the name of Veracini. Alfredo, no. But that was tempting. There are so many Baroque composers that you don't really hear, but then when you study, you find all these pieces for your students. And you do teach, yes? Yes? Yeah, she's retired. Yeah, we're not at, so this is a jig. So I want to say something about Bach before we get started. There's two things. I always say it's interesting when we love somebody or we love their work, it's always interesting to find out about them. We should not necessarily judge their work. For instance, Richard Wagner, who one of the greatest composers, did wonderful things, was a horrible, horrible person. He stole his best friend's wife. He hated the Jews. Hitler based his regime on writings of his. He's a miserable, miserable person. Does that mean that he was not a musical genius? That's rhetorical. So Bach, it's always interesting to know a little bit about Bach because he's such a monumental character. He had 20 children with 2 wives. He was very, very religious Lutheran, very tough guy. As a matter of fact, part of his job when he was hired by these churches, he had to write a cantata a week. Now, a cantata is maybe a 30-minute, 45-minute piece with chorus, orchestra, every week. Knock them out, baby. And these now are used by everyone as models. He knocked them out as work. One of the things that he writes is something that someone would have to do as their doctoral thesis one time in their life. You know, knock it out one time, and you knock it out, okay? There are stories, he was very tough about his work, and I understand this too. I'm now in a show that we're doing, Curious Savage, as an actor, a menial actor, not a director, and I have such respect for my director, Helene Cohen, because she's so even-tempered. People that have been directed by me are still bearing scars. I try not to leave marks. But I get very, so whenever Bach was like that too. He was actually arrested a few times for beating his students because they didn't do what he, now like, I learned this new word called presentism. Have we learned that yet? Okay, learn it, because it's what's going on now. It's judging what happened many moons ago by what we think now. For instance, you find out Washington had slaves, you're better than Washington, you don't have slaves. Okay. So we have to put people in their context. He was not very patient with children, maybe because he had 20 at home. He had two different wives, and he was a very stern fellow, not necessarily very jovial. Okay? I'm resisting from saying German type, because we don't do that anymore. But he was a tough guy. But that's why I love to listen to his music when it's joyous. You're going to hear a piece of music by Isabella, one of my Chinese friends, that is so joyous. It's hard to think that it came out of this very sour fellow. Anyway, let's go to our Gigue, or Gigue as they say, by Mr. Veracini. He just has initials. I don't know what his names are here. FM Veracini, not AM. FM Veracini. Yes, if you feel you got a crummy seat, shut up. We're going to move the piano. Okay, right after this piece, we're going to readjust so you'll have a different angle. Okay. All right. There you go. rotate a little bit. Next, we're going to have a fellow by the name of Liam Lee. I don't know quite. Liam, are you ready? He's going to appear. Come on out, Liam. Liam is 40 years old. Don't make fun. No, I don't. How old are you? 8. Liam's only 8. I just exaggerated by 32 years. Okay, he's going to play a piece by Bach. Bach wrote a couple of things, being that he had 20 kids and was a teacher. He wrote a lot of things to teach. As a matter of fact, he wrote a prelude and fugue in every key known to man in order to prove, because he invented a system where you could tune the keyboard to play in any key. Before he invented this system, you could only play in a few keys within a piece. And in order to prove that, it was like a manual. He composed these pieces that every single piano student in the world learns in order to show that his system of tuning worked. It was like a manual. So here's what I mean, that his work always is more than the sum of its parts. So he's going to play an invention, yes. And it's in B flat major. It's a very graceful little thing. So I'm going to relinquish the piano to you, Liam. It's all yours. Okay. He's waiting for his paycheck. He's got a long way. You can sit, if you want to sit out here so you can see everyone else play. Okay. Did you hear how it was the same musical figure over and over and over and over? It's called an invention. And the idea was to show how much you could do with just that economy of movement. Okay, now we're going to hear a piece of music, one of those suites. He wrote suites for cello and suites for violin, and we're so privileged to be able to have these guys here. I was reminded, I'm one of those people, I do so many things and I have a very selective memory. Once things are over, they go into the melting pot somewhere, they go into a cooker. And as a matter of fact, I had a friend who, we would go down the street and I'd say, oh gee, I haven't seen you for a long time, how are you? And then we'd get down to another block or so and say, don't you remember what that woman did to you? And she would give me the day, the time, what they were wearing, and she had this reservoir, and I don't remember that. So I did remember when the guys came over to play, these older guys, they showed me a picture of 5 years ago when we played together. And here they had this wonderful fond memory of it, and I just have that thing. I think, well, you don't have to shrink me. I think it has to do with having a childhood that I'd rather forget, so I learned how to forget very well to remain cheerful. So I don't remember everything. Even a people will say, I'll meet people on the street and they'll say, "Oh, Richard, I haven't seen you in so long. You changed my life." Would you like to reintroduce yourself? Once things are over, they're over, unfortunately. Okay, so now we're going to have, this is Ashley Lee. Is it Ashley Chow, right? Ashley Chow? Has she left? She's tired of waiting? I thought she would perform here. I think the majority of people can see her. She's playing unaccompanied cello. And the cello, some people say that the cello is the closest to the human voice. It doesn't go up into the stratosphere and it doesn't go very low. It's what kind of the human voice has. Here she is. Here's Ashley. And you know, I played the prelude to a suite. She is playing a prelude to the suite. This is suite number 3 for unaccompanied cello. Is that the best thing with the microphone? Yeah? Okay. Whenever you're ready. Thank you. if you knew how difficult that is to make music out of those notes. You know, Pablo Casals, you've heard that name? Pablo Casals, one of the probably most famous cellists. Every morning that he woke up, he would play the Bach suites. And there are other musicians that also use it as the bedrock of their music. Now we're going to have the same situation with the violin. And on Sunday, when Isabella came to my house, I almost exploded. This piece of music, for some reason, my grandfather was one of those people. He came over on the boat. His family came over on the boat from Ellis Island, and I found out that this was something. And doing some reading, those families had 7, 8, 9, 10 kids, and there was never enough money for anybody. So number one son got it all. Everyone in the family, they sold eggs, they went their newspaper route, whatever they did for number one son. My grandfather was number 4 son, and he never got over it. You know, he could have been a contender. But his thing was music. And he was the one who said, there were 4 boys in my family, and he used to sit me down. It was my privilege. I was having a good time playing it. He would sit me down and put those damn earphones on me. Because I was the only one who cared for that kind of music, and of course I wanted to please him. But one of the first pieces of music that I ever fell in love with was this piece that you're going to hear now. And even if you're not a classical musician by choice, most of you will recognize this because it's one of those pieces that's used in movies and things. You've just heard it all the time. It's like the epitome of the violin player. It's from the suite in E major, and it's the prelude. And now these guys like to be begged. You have to beg them. There she is. And she plays this so beautifully, I think. And to be introduced to this is the kind of music that, I don't know how old Isabella is. How old are you, Isabella? 11? Holy moly. But this is the kind of music that, I'm old enough now. I'm going to be 74 in a few weeks. And some of this music, oh, thank you for getting here, yeah. yeah, some people probably wanted to stop my life earlier. But this is the kind of music you play at the age of 11. And then you look at it again at 13, and you look at it again at 74, and it's still amazing to you. It is bottomless. You understand it better, your technique changes, you view it differently. And it's sometimes interesting to take a piece of music that you like and listen to, say, someone like Rubinstein, who was a pianist, listen to him when he recorded it when he was 20, and then listen when he recorded it when he was 40, and listen to it when he recorded it when he was 60. When I was last in Europe, a friend of mine, I was with a group, and they have different tastes than me. They didn't want to go to the opera. I was in, I think it was Verona, and they had an opera going on outside. Who wants to go with me? Who wants to go? No one wants to go with me. Well, it's very difficult to get people to enjoy, so I said to them, okay, listen, come to the opera with me. I want to introduce it to you. They said, well, okay, let's choose an opera that has lots of spectacle, because I don't think I can take that music. So I chose something called Orpheus and Eurydice, Orfeo e Euridice. Usually it's 18th century, big dresses, the panniers, headdresses and things. So I got them to come to the opera, and I knew I was in trouble. Because when I got there, I looked at the stage, and the curtain, they call that the grand rag, the front curtain, was up. And there were just piles of rocks on the stage. And sure enough, this whole thing was done in Doc Martens and trench coats. And you had to really love the music. But there was one bonus. There's a famous section called the Dance of the Blessed Spirits, because as you know, Orpheus is a great musician and his wife dies, and God says you can go down and try and get her and bring her back. But if you look at her one time on the way back up, she's going to... Well, anyway, there's a famous Dance of the Blessed Spirits. So we're so tired of looking at all these Doc Martens, and the ballet dancers come out, and they're totally naked. No, totally naked. Now, of course, they weren't dancing really ballet. It was we call it plastic. They would slowly move into a pose. Oh, yeah, that's the famous Canova statue, or, but they were completely naked. So anyway, you never know. Music is always, you go back to it and back to it and back to it, and it's always new and different. When Bach composed these, there was no commission. He decided I just wanted to do them. And now, you wish somehow you could send the royalties back. Here it is, 300 years later. He was born in 1685 and died in 1750. Died in 1750. And here we are, excited to hear his music. You wish somehow that you could get that message to them. Well, anyway, here we are, this wonderful prelude from the E major suite. We're going to, we need a mic for Isabella. Look at that gown. Now we're going to get some piano music. We're going to progress now to Mozart. A lot of people know Mozart from the movie Salieri. He had an advantageous life in that his father was a musician, pretty much benign fellow. As a matter of fact, he wrote a violin technique book, still you can find today. So Mozart was supposed to be like Daddy. He actually learned the violin first. He wrote 5 violin concertos when he was very young, and then he left that form, never wrote any more again, but they're part of the violin repertoire. Mozart had a sister who was very talented, so you could go into one of those woke situations that the sister might have been just as talented, but women didn't do that sort of thing. The same thing was true of Mendelssohn. Now they're uncovering a lot of Fanny Mendelssohn music. This was not an opportunity open, but now there's all this wonderful stuff. Who knows what would have happened? But Mozart had the problem. Someone who shall remain nameless, I don't know if they're here tonight. I did invite him, but I don't know if he came. But he told me, I thought it was a wonderful expression because we're probably all dealing with this. He said, Richard, I used to be the golden boy. He said, I'm not the golden boy anymore. You know, he's 80 years old, and it's difficult to deal with that. So relating to Mozart, you know, you just say these things, but think about it. A little Austrian boy, I would say probably lower middle class, and he went to Maria Theresa's, and he played with Marie Antoinette, who was only 5 or 6 years old. He jumped on the laps of kings and queens and was fondled. And in those days, you didn't pay money. That was considered gross. Money never changed hands. You give them a diamond, a golden snuff box, something they could hawk, but you know, nothing, not money per se. So this child at 5 years old, you know, the sun didn't set. His parents' income came from him. They traveled all over Europe with him. But suddenly, when he became 15, 16 years old, he was just another musician. And it was very difficult to deal with it. When he had a job, a musician was considered a craftsman. You entered with the servants through the kitchen. You didn't come through the foyer and the grand staircase. And this was something that he had a very tough time dealing with. He always lived above his means because when he was a child, he hung around in this world. Okay? But I'm just going to play some music. I don't want to go on and on. But his music, what I always tell my students when they play Mozart, everything has a little lace at the cuff. After I play Mozart, I'm going to play a Beethoven thing, and you will see the wide difference in the approach. And this piece is the end of a sonata. A sonata is a very classic form, usually fast, slow, fast. This is the final movement, the final movement of a piano sonata. And whatever grandeur is in it, it ends with the very famous Mozart suspension. It ends with a whisper. There's no boom, boom at the end, which Beethoven tend to like. So I'm going to play this piece for you. I chose this because it's so typical Mozart and so much fun. This music, to put it together, let's put a little switcheroo here. This music would have been played in a home. The idea of a concert hall didn't exist yet. It was beginning to happen. But of course, some of these palaces, of course, had magnificent rooms, but it was performed in a home. So he would bring it not to a big bombastic ending because he wanted to be polite. You know, it wasn't until the idea of a conductor wasn't really invented until Beethoven. The idea was, everyone who knows ballet was developed in the courts. And you could not face away from the king. There's the king. So all the dances had to be done kind of like the Irish, you know, that they do, you know. But then someone decided, well, we could probably get away with maybe a little croisé, maybe? A little effacé, and then they went crazy, a little écarté this way. Okay, well, there was the same thing with music. Music had to be performed in front of the king and the queen. So you couldn't have a conductor with his back to the king and the queen. So actually there was a famous composer by the name of Lully. He worked for Louis XIV, you may have heard of him. And the way he conducted was he had a big, beautiful, jeweled pole, and he would bang the tempo as people were playing. Well, unfortunately, once he caught his foot and got an infection and died. That's how he died. But anyway, Beethoven was the very first guy to say "fangu." I don't know if he actually said that. And he turned his back to the audience and conducted for the first time. So now I'm going to play a sonata of Beethoven. I always love to connect people. We tend to study famous people and think that they live in a bubble. So I always find it interesting when people knew each other. Beethoven didn't have the same luck as Mozart in the father area. His father wanted him to be another Mozart because he saw Mozart as a moneymaker. And Beethoven did have the talent, but his father beat him and was a drunk. He was kind of a town trumpeter in the band, and he was not very kind. So you can see the anger. I don't mean to be a shrink, but you can see the anger in his music. So this is called the Pathétique Sonata. And it has an intro, which is telling you right off, you better listen to this. This is not background music. But it's still just a movement to a sonata, but only a few years later. He did study, they say, he took a few lessons from Haydn and also did meet Mozart, but Mozart did not accept him as a pupil. feel the difference in the approach. Beethoven also, we don't want to judge him by who he was, we want to just judge his music, but he was a horrible, horrible slob. He was never able to keep an apartment. He could never stay for more than a month or 2 months, maybe half a year, and they throw him the hell out because but like most people, and I told you his upbringing, he yearned for love. He never ever found love. There were all kinds of, he wrote music to my dearly beloved, and we've been searching and searching to find out who it was. And now we live in a world, it could have been a trans person, could have been a gay person. We don't know anything about that. But he was a very angry fellow. But late in his life, he had a brother who he was estranged from. But his brother had a kind of a problem, and he took his nephew and tried to be a father to him. It was not very successful at all. And the son tried to commit suicide. Anyway, speaking of that sort of thing, I want to play something by Schumann. Schumann was a very interesting fellow. He was a good-looking guy. He unfortunately fell in love with the daughter of his piano teacher, and she was a world-class impresario. So the father was not so willing to let her go. He spent years and years begging and begging to be with her, and finally they did marry. They had 6 kids. Here's the sad part. He died at 48 in an insane asylum. He was one of those people who he could tell when it was coming on, and he would say to his wife, "It's coming," and she would walk him to the sanitarium. And he had this one thing that he would hear a scale in his brain. He'd hear over and over and over and over and over again in his brain, and he had to go to a piano and finish the scale. But that's just one thing. But we're going to get to Brahms. As I said, I love to see the bridge between these different composers. We'll get to that in a bit. But he was a very original composer, and because, here's a very interesting thing. I've never seen it written, but I assume he was known to have bouts of insanity. So when his music was unusual, instead of saying he was inventive and imaginative, he was fucking nuts. So his music was not considered what it is now. I forget who it was, but one of the great pianists said, if I had to be left on a desert island with only one person's piano music, it would be Schumann's. This is a piece called Arabesque. Arabesque comes from just being a beautiful design. The Muslims don't believe in doing flowers and trees and things like that. So their writing is beautiful. And so this got to be a beautiful sort of line with an arabesque. And of course an arabesque is also a thing for ballet. But this is, I think, a very nice piece of music. Very sweet and very private. like, I'm going to take another gyration right here, was also, just like Wagner, a literary man. His father owned a bookshop, and Schumann wrote over 600 songs to about 200 poets. Now, how many of us have ever read 200 frickin' poets, let alone understood them enough to have a feeling and write songs for them that are still sung today? But he also, because he was literary, he developed the first kind of musical gazette, a newspaper. So he was friends with Mendelssohn, with Berlioz, with Chopin, with Liszt. You know, it's hard to think. As I say, we read one book and we think of these people in our own little cubicle, however we've read about them or seen the movie, but I always get so fascinated about how they reacted. And in his life, he was known more as a poet, and his music was considered crazy. But he did know Chopin, and now I'm going to play 3 little mazurkas. Chopin was an interesting fellow. You know, you can't help, as I say, you want to just look at their music for what it is, but you can't help being interested in the people that created this music, you know. Chopin was born in Poland, but he had his career in Paris. There were a lot of people, expatriates from Poland. I don't know if you know your history, I won't get into it, but Poland is one of those countries that was very unfortunate in its location. It was between the 2 bullies, and Poland disappeared from the map, not once, not twice, 3 times Poland disappeared off the face of the earth. So you can imagine how nationalistic Polish people are about their country. So he became a symbol, and he happened to like the mazurka form, which is a lovely dance, and the Polonaise form. So those songs became a beacon for Polish freedom. He was a very delicate fellow. He was kind of the epitome of what we think of as the artiste, which we're trying to get over that crap today, you know? We're trying to say there's nothing that's totally masculine or totally feminine. Someone can be a pianist and be a football player, you know, we don't have to categorize like that. But he was the epitome of the artiste. He was consumptive. If he didn't have any money, he would spend it on lovely leather gloves rather than anything else. He was a real snob about things and people. And he had a very interesting relationship with George Sand. Look that up. She was an author who left her, she was a nobility, she had a lot of money. She left her home, her lovely home, Nohant, and went to Paris dressed as a man and had her affair with Chopin. Chopin was also friends with Liszt, who left his wife and was hanging around with this countess who had all of the money. So I love to talk about these things. Anyway, these mazurkas are very intimate little dances. I'm going to play 3 of them, and I'm going to ask you, please, to hold your applause no matter how excited you are. There's 3 little dances, so you can wait until the 3rd one's over. I chose this as a very typical Chopin, and very intimate for a setting like this. He would, again, he would not ever be paid. He would be invited to come to the palace or to wherever this lovely home was, and they would listen to him play, and they would give him, the next day, a coach and 4 would arrive with a lovely gift. Because he wanted to be considered he didn't want to be considered a part of just so we would never just hand him money. Here we are. 3 mazurkas by Freddie Chopin. happen. And the last thing that I'm going to play for you is by Brahms. Now, I love to tear Brahms apart. Here's the deal. If you ever seen pictures of him, remember in Cabaret, the musical Cabaret? They had the Nazi youth, they chose whoever was the prettiest little blonde, blue-eyed boys in the company, and they sang, "Tomorrow belongs to me." Remember all that? Well, Brahms looked like that. Blonde, long hair, blue eyes, exquisite. Total pedophile person. I mean, you could not resist this gorgeous, gorgeous boy. Okay. Now he had a problem. His mummy was a sweet little heavy thing who got pregnant by the town trumpeter. And he was very good looking and he married the old cow. But that was about the attitude in the house. Then on top of that, Brahms' first job was playing in a whorehouse. Well, you gotta get the jobs where you can. Look what I'm doing. Just joking. So he went to this place, and guys can get very impatient. I haven't had this experience, but I don't know. The tango was also invented for guys that were impatient waiting for their 15 minutes of fame. In the waiting room, it can get pretty tense. Okay? So he used to play the piano there. So the connection is, he was a young boy and he heard about Schumann and his newspaper and went to see him. And he became a third wheel to Clara and Robert Schumann. Now, no one was a fly on the wall, so we don't know exactly what happened. But there were lots of time when Robert was in the sanitarium and Johannes was there to comfort Clara. And when Schumann did pass away, Brahms was around to comfort Clara. So we really don't know what happened. But probably what happened was, because of his situation with his mother and his father, and because of his first experience with sex was in a whorehouse, he probably, I've not read it anywhere, but I'll find it someday, because I'm sure I'm right. I mean, he had a problem with it. He found little girls, younger ladies, because he used to compose beautiful songs and conduct, and he would always have little flirtations, but never really had a relationship. And remember how gorgeous he was? Well, if you see pictures of Brahms, he turned into Santa Claus. This big, with a beard, you could see he was hiding. Anyway, okay, his position in music. Just when everyone was saying, you know what, everything has been done that can be done with the diatonic scale. Now we're going to go venture into all kinds of modern stuff that sounds crazy. He was one of the last people that said, no, I'm going to do the exact rules, and I'll do something totally different that you've ever heard before. They say that he had a terrific ear. He got a job accompanying a violinist, and he went to some dump somewhere where the piano was 1/2 step off. So he could transpose a half step up like that, so that the violinist wouldn't have to alter. So I'm going to play a piece of music. It's just called a little intermezzo, but I want you to listen to the harmonies of this thing. And he was greatly fond of the 2 against 3. I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but okay, let's try a little experiment. I want everyone to clap like this. We're going to clap just like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, now keep it going. Now, my job is to fit 3s into those 2s. You keep going. Don't get distracted by little old me. Okay, here we go. Okay, now Brahms was very fond of this. And when you play the music, you really shouldn't be aware of it. But now I've told you, so you're going to be aware of it. But the idea is to make it smooth, but it makes it so rich, especially in symphonic music, because everyone's playing at a different pace, and somehow it meshes together and makes a beautiful sound. Okay, little Brahms. Now we're going to go back to our wonderful Chinese treasure, and Simon is going to play a piece of music that he had the privilege of working with the composer on. Maybe I'll let him tell a little bit about it. Is Simon asleep back there? I understand if you were. Simon, come here. When Simon came over, his mom showed me a picture of us 5 years ago. Can we bring a mic for Simon, just so you can tell us a little bit about this piece? Because it's very interesting.
All right, everyone, I hope you're having a good night. I hope you enjoyed this performance.
Everyone's a comedian.
So this piece is really unique. At my music school, there's this really talented composer, and he wrote this piece. It was actually like kind of transcribed from Thelonious Monk's "Well You Needn't," which is a very jazz piece for those of you who might know it. And yeah, he wrote it, and he incorporated like a lot of new rhythms and melodies, and overall it's just like really fun to play. But at the beginning it was kind of hard to learn.
That's the understatement, Chinese understatement.
But like once you get the hang of it, it's actually like really groovy and it's really fun to play. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it.
Okay, we'll do one more final switch. We're going to finish now. You know, there's always different ways, really, of finishing, either with a bang or a whimper. And I'm going to ask my friend to join me and play a piece of music that is very important to me. It was introduced to me in a very emotional point in my life when I was a ballet dancer at the time, and she wanted to commit suicide, and she lived in Japan at that time. Every morning I would get up 5 o'clock in the morning, I'd call Japan and I say, Patty, you've got to do this today? And finally, it's a long story, asked me sometimes, but then she came to live with us and she's fine. But this piece of music was, I forbid her to listen to it. Because this put her into a mood, a very pensive kind of mood. It's by Rachmaninoff, it's called Vocalise, and anyone who's listened to classical radio, you'll hear it. It's, oh, what is that? What is that? There must be more people that call up to find out what this piece is. And let me explain a little bit of it harmonically. Again, Rachmaninoff was another composer while people were going off like Schoenberg and Stravinsky, making all kinds of atonal noises, wild, crazy sounds, and going into new... He said, listen, we can still make it sound with the same old scales, we can do wonderful things. And one thing about his second piano concerto was so popular that it sent him to a shrink because he was so afraid that he wouldn't be able to create something else. For 2 years he didn't compose anything because it was so popular. And if you ever remember the movie, The 7-Year Itch, with Marilyn Monroe and Tom Mule, remember? Tom Mule's wife goes away to camp with the kids, he's all alone. And Marilyn Monroe moves into the upstairs apartment. So she comes down one day to borrow something or other, and he asked her to dinner. So there's a fantasy sequence where suddenly you see this schlub, Tom Mule, suddenly dressed somewhat like this, as a matter of fact. And Marilyn comes in with a fabulous gown, you know, with everything, hugging everything, and he plays Rachmaninoff's piano concerto, who's the symbol of romance. So this piece of music is just a beautiful inspiration, and I'm so glad to be able to play it with Jerry. It's called Vocalise, and will end our concert with a thoughtful sound. What's that? Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you to my friends, my international friends, and my old retired friends.